didn't want to have a PM telling me where to put the button or how big to make the font. I wanted to make those decisions myself.
How does this look at PostHog? What's so different about PostHog?
Engineers are the final call. They decide what to build and when to build and how to build.
Have you seen an increase in productivity because of AI?
It feels it's sometimes more frustrating. It's easier to be frustrated when you see someone else doing something wrong and you're like, no, that's not what I told you to do.
Today's guest is Raquel Smith. She's an executive engineering, a product executive from PostHog. So welcome, Raquel. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Nice. So let's get started a bit with your background story. So you have very diverse experience. You actually started with a degree in biology and microbiology, and then you got into code. So what happened like from that moment to until you started working for PostHog? What's your story?
Yeah, I think if I had had more of a choice or a little bit more maturity, I would have studied computer science in college. But I think that it ended up being somewhat of a blessing that I didn't, because then I was able to find my way on my own, which I think has been really valuable for me learning. But just the short story is that I found a company that would let me kind of tool around with their website. And I worked for them as a forum moderator and then web developer, and then kind of grew into some more serious WordPress plugin engineering. And then uh, started building like an actual SaaS product with them. And then did that for a little while, decided to try pure product management. And that was fun. I really enjoyed the being able to think about the products, but I missed coding. So then I started my own startup and did a large part of the engineering for that. And really got, I don't know, deeper into engineering than I had been in the past, because I was responsible for everything from the infrastructure all the way to not only the front end code and UX, but also like how we were reaching out to potential customers or partners to work with, and doing the whole sales cycle as well. So that was in marketing also. So that was an incredible learning experience. And then when I wrapped that up, I didn't want to just be an engineer. I had been a product manager at a place where engineers weren't super empowered, and that I knew that like I wanted to code, but I didn't want to have a PM telling me where to put the button or how big to make the font. I wanted to make those decisions myself. So PostHog seemed like a place where I could potentially do that. And so that's why I joined, and I'm still here.
Yeah, so I think it takes a lot of courage to do what you did, like going from something that you studied that was biology, microbiology, to something completely different. And not everyone is kind of willing to take that leap, right? So what was really the moment where you realized, like, I'm done with that and I don't want to do biology, I want to do coding?
Um, I think, I think I knew that like I just had more fun. Again, you said this podcast was about fun. I just had more fun coding, right? Like I think the first time my first line of code I ever wrote was I had a little WordPress site where I would post recipes and pictures of food, and the like I wanted to change the header color to orange. And so I like found the style sheet, and then I found the hex color that I needed to change, or the the CSS property, and I changed the hex number to the color that I thought it was going to be, and I swore that I was like going to take the site down when I clicked the save button. But it worked, and it was just this like, oh my god, it worked. Like that's so cool. I think biology has some similar things, but it's just so much slower. I'm a fairly fast-paced person, and the fact that I could like make a change and see immediately what that change was, just was much more of a fit for how my brain works and the pace that I like to do things. I mean, with microbiology, you can have a bunch of experiments going at a time, but like, you plate some microorganisms on a plate and then you have to wait literally 24 hours. And I just like to see if anything grows, right? And that just really wasn't what I wanted. And then the other thing was that at my job, a part of my job was answering questions about our products, like technical questions, at the microbiology place I worked, which is a great company. They're still here doing great. But I remember I was like sending an email to my mom or something, and my boss got mad at me for not for like doing something personal on my work time. Which it's like I get, but I was also, I was just sending an email to my mom, and that didn't really vibe with me. I'm not the type of person who's like, you need to sit in this chair for 8 hours and do nothing but work. That's just not how I work. And not how I saw my career going. And I got an opportunity to work remotely and for this company and do some small WordPress development for them. And um it just was much more of a fit for my personality type. So I guess that's the thing that I looked for and that really drove me was like, is this how I see myself moving forward, or is there another opportunity that is going to fit me better?
Yeah, for me it was the MySpace blog. I don't know if you ever used MySpace at
Yeah, a
the
long time
time.
ago.
Yeah, like you could like customize all the themes, and it was great. That's how I got started. So very similar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so we get to 2023, and you are working for PostHog already, and you wrote this article where you say that product engineering is the most fun role you ever had. And
Mhm.
you kind of say this is because of 4 specific reasons. So you say one is challenging problem to solve. You have support from other highly motivated colleagues. 3, the autonomy to make important decisions. And 4, complete transparency into why your work matters. So is this still true in 2026? Did anything change?
No, I don't think anything about those things have changed. I think those are fairly fundamental. And not only for product engineering, but I think those things describe why any job can may or may not be motivating. I think, you could have a marketing role, and if you can check those boxes, transparency into why your work matters and challenging problems to solve and coworkers who are, just as motivated as you are, though that makes for a fun work environment.
I mean, this is something that we can read on a lot of job posting, right? So this is something that companies do to sell their, I don't know, their like work with us. This is what we do, right? This is
Yeah.
what you can do with us. But I think so. How does this look at postdoc? So what's so different about postdoc that in our these 4 principles are delivered?
So so I will say that whenever you join a new company, there's always the big question, is this company on the inside the way it is represented on the outside? And the more of a black box the company is, the more risky making that decision is going to be. Um, a previous job that I worked was definitely told one thing about my role, what role I would be doing and what that would look like. And then when I got in there, it ended up not being that way at all. And that's because they're like I couldn't even use the software before I joined the company. I had almost no idea what I was getting myself into. And so I think the more open a company is, the more you can trust that what they say the job will be like is actually what it's like. So for PostHog, you can actually see that we're, just drastically, wildly open and transparent. And you can see in real time the customer. Well, one, anybody can sign up and use the product, but two, you can see on GitHub, someone filing an issue or commenting on an issue, and then an engineer interacting with that person and asking a question and then saying, here's the PR to fix. Oftentimes these types of interactions happen in like a private support ticket as well. But you can, as a customer, you can see if I file a support ticket, and it's something that isn't just like pointing me at the correct documentation or something. If there's an actual technical issue, the engineers are involved. So I think that's really critical. It's surprising to me how many people I interview and I ask them what their interaction with customers has been like in the past, which is a common interview question of mine. Um, and they've been unfortunately put behind a PM or someone's, some sort of customer facing role. And some people are never even allowed to talk to customers, which is just, I don't know. For me, that's not like a fit, right? I want to be able to hear why, why a customer is struggling. For instance, um, we've had a conversation recently about fixing little paper cuts that exist across our app, and some people are saying, well, we have a ton of people internally who know what the paper cuts are, so we should just ask people internally what the problems are and fix them. Which it's like, yes, I mean, I think that sounds like a great idea, but at the same time, when you get an engineer in a room with someone and that person shares their screen and says, this is what I'm trying to do and this is what I'm trying to achieve, and it's really painful for me to not be able to do this. One thing is like, you can't right now drag a node in a notebook to a different location. You can drag other things, but you can't drag a text node. And when you see the customer trying to do that, it's so much more motivating to be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I need to go fix that. Like this is a problem, right? So I think keeping engineers in touch directly with customers is just so huge. And so we're very intentional about not putting any layers in between engineers and customers, because that's really the best way to motivate people, your engineers, but also motivated people do the best work, right? So it's really it's a win-win situation when engineers are happier because they're motivated by directly talking to customers, and the business does better because we have really motivated engineers who are doing great work.
And how does that look like in practice? How can engineers get in touch with users if they want to maybe do an interview or discovery?
Yeah, in in theory, there are no guardrails. I mean, there's minor guardrails around like, if this is one of our large managed customers, ask their account manager if it's okay for you to reach out right now. It's possible that they're like in the middle of some sort of important discussion or something, and we don't want to interrupt that flow. So for the big managed accounts, then you should check in first. But aside from that, there are no guardrails around like, can you email a customer to ask for their feedback? Can you ask them to get on a customer interview? Um, can you send them a survey or whatever? Um, so we're very much like, honestly, one of our big things is trust over process. I trust you to make the right call and do the right thing in terms of getting this customer's feedback. Um, so in theory, anyone can do it at any time. I think it does become a little challenging when teams are so busy. They have so many things to do. They have a backlog of feature requests. And when you have as many customers or as many users as PostHog does, it feels a little overwhelming to decide who should I reach out to, who are the right customers, who should I be talking to. So we do have our product managers. They're oftentimes responsible for making sure customer interviews are happening on a consistent basis. We are understaffed on product managers. If there's any PMs who ever listen to this, and or engineers who want to do more PM type work, you should definitely apply. But I think that some teams that doesn't happen as often as it should, but we do try and set it up so that while engineers can do the legwork if they want to, it does happen a little bit more automatically for them.
So going back to the four ingredients for having fun, right? So the first one was challenging problems to solve, and so I know that at PostHog, engineers can work on problems hand to hand, right? So not
Mhm.
specifically a technical problem, but also a product problem. So how does that work in practice, and what are the, let's say, the boundaries with product managers?
Yeah. So in terms of working on something end to end, anytime a project has to be handed off to someone else, it slows down so much because then it gets in a queue, someone else's queue, they have to prioritize it. It's possible they won't be able to work on it for, a few weeks. Um, so we really value having engineers. All of our product engineers are very full stack, who can do something, write the API, write the backend logic, create the middleware if needed, create the front end if needed, and like make sure the UX is okay. So they can do the entire stack all the way up and down. And that means that there's really only one person ever working on a single feature at a time. There are some times when, really big projects need to have multiple people on them, but even then, the vast majority of the time, we try and, what are the vertical slices even within this thing, and have one person do one thing all the way from the bottom to the top. So that just makes it so that we're not waiting around. Anyone who wants to build a thing can build the whole thing without having to get anyone else involved. What was the second half of your question? Oh, what are the boundaries
Yeah.
between product managers and product engineers? So the boundaries, I think it's really important as a company to set up and understand what the boundaries are. And this is something we're really clear about in our job postings and when we're interviewing product managers. I think a lot of people come to us because we've been so clear about what is the role of a product manager at PostHog. Most people who come to us don't have any sort of issue with the way we've set it up, but the way we've set it up, and it goes for, people in sales as well. I've worked at places where sales wants to be the decision maker on all the product features that are built. But at PostHog, engineers are the final call. They decide what to build and when to build, and how to build also. That doesn't mean that other people's opinions aren't highly valued. We very much highly value the opinions of product managers and salespeople and marketing folks, and engineers like are, really want that feedback and need that in order to make good decisions. But at the end of the day, the engineers are the ones who write the code, and so they are the ones who are deciding what to build when. So once that baseline has been set, the role of a product manager at PostHog becomes really clear. The role is to do the research in order to understand, what are the things that need to be built first. What does the competitive landscape look like? What do our numbers look like? What's our churn? What's our growth rate this month? So do the research so that they can give all that context to the engineers and have a really deep conversation about, these are what the users need. These are, opportunities that we see. And then at that point, it's handed off for the engineers to say, okay, this is what I'm going to work on. And it's not like, I don't want to, people to go away thinking that, a PM comes to an engineer and says, this is a big problem. I really think we should fix this. And the engineer just says, no, I'm making the decision. That's not how we work at all. It's very, very respectful, and everybody really values everyone's input, but because there is a clear decision maker, I think it makes it work really well. I think if you have if you're a company that has PMs who are the decision makers, and then you try and make product engineers give them more decision making capacity, you either have to say, okay, in this thing, we're going to try it where product engineers are the decision makers, and PMs not need to not be able to be the final call, or you have to like change the whole org. But if you don't have that clarity around who owns the decisions, then things are going to get confusing and difficult.
Right. So can we say that at PostHog, product managers are like managing the bigger context, so the bigger picture, and they act like,
Yes.
like a compass, right, for everyone in the company.
Yeah.
And then the engineers kind of own a slice of that context, so they can work on a specific problem end to end, and then ask for help when needed. Is it like that?
Yeah. Um, I wouldn't necessarily say engineers own a slice of the context. And maybe it is so. So a PM at PostHog usually has a number of teams under them. Usually 3 is like a happy spot. Um, and we keep them stretched intentionally, but so maybe in that light, like if a PM at Postdoc has 3 teams, then they give 1/3 of their context to the feature flags team, and then the feature flags team owns that slice. So I think that could be true. It's not true that the PM has all the context about feature flags and then just doles out the little bits that the engineers can handle. That's not it at all. The PM is responsible for gathering that context, and bringing it all to the engineers. The PMs also own pricing at PostHog, which is incredibly important, and that's usually an area that the PMs own completely, pricing and launch. That the engineers aren't really involved in those types of decisions. So I think maybe on the pricing side, they're not always needing to give all of that context to the engineers. Although with the relationships that our PMs usually have with them, that context is given. They're asking for feedback from the engineers, etc.
So regarding like asking feedback and collaboration between product engineers, I read one of the latest articles from the newsletter that said like collaboration sucks. It was very, it was a very strong opinion there, and I think it triggered a lot of people for sure. But maybe
Yeah.
could you get a bit more into that?
Yeah, and that's about speed, really, and making good decisions. But I think it's primarily about speed. The worst thing that can happen at a company is that you just try so hard to reach consensus with everyone that you never actually do anything. There is no world in which you get 10 people into a room and they're all going to agree on everything, at least not within a short amount of time. And we're a startup. We want to move fast. We need to move fast. And if we are wasting half of our available time on trying to get everyone into agreement, then we're getting half as much done. So really, the reason that we try and limit collaboration a little bit is the same thing. Like it's I guess it can be seen in the fact that we try and have a single engineer who can do all the back end code changes and all the front end code changes, because when you have to get multiple people involved, it just slows everything down. Whether it's because of a handoff or differences of opinion, when you can get a single engineer who takes the thing, does it all, and ships it, and then they can hear feedback from customers and iterate from there, then that works really well. So it's not that we don't actively look for opinions from others. It's that you really shouldn't try and get opinions from everyone. And to not insert yourself where you don't need to be. So for instance, we were dealing with a people issue at the exec level, and for some reason someone had tagged me into the thread, so I was aware of it and getting notifications for it, and then they'd say something and then I'd respond, but then Tim ended up being like, Raquel, I appreciate you being here, but you don't need to be here right now. And I was like, oh, you're totally right. Like, I'm wasting my time, right? I'm not being that helpful here. You don't need my opinions. So I, turned off reply notifications for that thread so that I stopped getting notified about it. And I think that, like, being aware of when you need people involved, who you need involved, and who you don't need involved is really important as an organization. So we have an RFC process, for instance, where a request for comments is an RFC, and that's where you write out everything. You lay all the context out. This is the decision we're making. This is the context involved. These are the potential solutions. This is my recommendation, and here's why. And then you tag certain people in. You say, I think I need your opinion because you know about this one thing. I think I need this other person's opinion because they know about this other thing. And then you can, request for those specific people to give you their thoughts. But the worst thing is when, you have a decision that needs to be made that isn't really all that important. And then 10 people come in with their own opinions, and then it just slows down. So I think that was Charles's collaboration sucks was Charles's honestly very great take on like how to think about why and when you're getting people involved, because a lot of the time someone just needs to make a decision.
So I can imagine someone listening to this episode may think, okay, but if you work like this, you may be losing in terms of like diversity of perspective. Like if you don't have like you don't really act as a team. You're like you have what one person that's is doing everything. So maybe that do you think that this could be like a cons of work like in this way? What would you say to these people thinking like that?
No, um, when you talk about a team, so the teams operate more based on feedback after something has happened. So I played volleyball in high school, right? Um, I would go up to hit the ball, and if I hit it out of bounds or something, the coach comes over and says, "Hey, you hit that ball out of bounds. You should, change the angle of your wrist or whatever." It's not like the coach is there holding my wrist while I'm going up to hit the ball, you know? Like so I do the thing and then I get feedback about how it could have been better. And that is hyper valuable. And that is what we want to optimize for. That way I can make a better decision next time without having slowed down the decision that I made this time. And then on the diversity of perspectives thing, that's assuming that there are only a few decision makers in the organization. But in reality, every single person should be owning their one thing, and be making decisions about that. So maybe, you aren't making a decision over here about this thing, but you're making a decision over there about that thing, and we will get the diversity of perspectives and opinions. And I mean, I'm classically someone who throws my opinion in on things. And so, you know, it's not that we're like, nobody can come share their opinions about this marketing launch we're going to do, right? But it's more about like the urge to find consensus versus hearing opinions and then the decision maker knowing I should listen to this or I shouldn't, and I'm just going to say, hey, thanks for your opinion, see you later, I'm not going to listen to it right now, for whatever reasons. So yeah, I think those aren't super, like, the especially diversity of opinions isn't super valid as a valid downside.
Okay. So back to the fun stuff. So what's with the hedgehog? Like, why is the hedgehog the mascot of PostHog?
Why is the hedgehog the mascot of PostHog? um I don't really know. Max predated me at the company. Max is the hedgehog's name. Our AI bot was called Max for a little bit, but now it's just PostHog AI, but the hedgehog is still named Max. Um, and I think the hedgehog exists. Tim and James didn't want like a boring SaaS company. And so one of the first hires that they made was Lottie, who's our illustrator. And this is again like what happens when you just kind of give people free reign to do what they think is cool and important. And so Lottie has drawn, I don't know, she should count the number of hedgehogs that she's drawn in her probably coming up on 6 years here at PostHog. Um, it's probably insane. She probably doesn't even want to know how many hedgehogs she's drawn. But yeah, it just, I think, came about because they hired her and said, do this thing, and we don't want to be a normal, boring SaaS company. And so Max definitely has taken on a life of his own, and is a really important, beloved part of our brand. I think if anyone is thinking about starting a company and asking themselves whether or not they should have a mascot, I'd say the answer is absolutely yes. You should have a mascot. It's such a fun way for us to express ourselves, um, just with a silly little hedgehog mascot.
Yeah, and also the website, like I think there was a complete redesign. It was kind of fun to see it. Like looks like an operative system. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's good
that
to be
was
on
pretty
there.
wild. And again, that's a result of uh, someone having a vision, that someone being Corey, our designer. He had a vision for the website. Honestly, one of the where it came from is PostHog has so many products, and it's really hard to make something simple with all the information that we need to be able to give about it. And so Corey was thinking like, well, what's something that has basically infinite possibility and flexibility, but that still has like good information hierarchy? And he thought about an OS, right? Like your Mac OS or your Windows OS. And so he designed it around that and just was able to push forward and do this like wild, crazy project. I think it took him and Eli over 6 months to build, and it wasn't perfect on launch, but that's not really what we're optimizing for. We're optimizing for doing really cool things, and I think a lot of people on the internet said it was like the coolest website that has been launched. I don't know, maybe since MySpace profiles were able to be customized.
Yeah, pretty cool. And I really don't want to ask you how fun are your like company meetups. Let's not get into that.
Oh, they're so fun. We have so much fun. I just got back from a call or from a meetup in San Francisco with our data stack team. And yeah, definitely have lots of fun.
Yeah.
But it's like wholesome fun. PostHog's a very wholesome company. We're not like having wild ragers or anything like that.
Okay. Cool. So, um, in your article, you write that part of the formula of having fun as an engineer is also this kind of dopamine rush you get with coding, like solving problems, and that's what we really like to do as engineers. But now with AI, this kind of fun can kind of be threatened, right? So what have you been seeing in happening regarding this also with engineers at PostHog?
Yeah. That's actually an interesting question in terms of how AI like makes the job of an engineer more or less fun. I think Dylan Martin wrote about this recently. I can send you the link later to his website, but he was saying that his role still is just as fun, but it's very different today than it was 3 years ago when I wrote that article. Um, and then this week I was actually doing some coding, and the whole workflow is very different. It's more obviously prompting than it is actually handwriting code. Um, and if I think about like what it used to be back then versus what it is now, so I used to pick up a problem, say it was a part of the code base I hadn't worked in at all, because that's the type of problem that I was working on this past week. Um, and I'd pick up the problem, I'd have to wade through the files to find what I'm looking for, kind of, eventually find my way to a file that I think is what I want to be changing, and then actually think about how to make these changes myself. Um, it wouldn't work the first time, almost never does. And so then there's lots of like trying different things and wondering what I'm missing, wading through functions, and um, it's very like I personally was so involved in the coding that I was doing. Whereas now someone else is doing that coding. And someone is the AI, right? But it's like it's not me, it's outside of me. So I think it feels at sometimes more frustrating. It's easier to be frustrated when you see someone else doing something wrong and you're like, no, that's not what I told you to do, versus stumbling through it yourself. You're like, oh, yeah, I understand why I screwed that up. Right. So I think it can be more frustrating to have something else do something wrong. I remember I was trying to I was building some little draggable nodes in our notebooks for you can move a header, right? And drag it around instead of copy paste. And I said this icon isn't lining up next to any of the headers or the paragraphs, like make it line up. And then it did something like totally off the wall. I was like, what the hell is going on? All you needed to do was like adjust the CSS a little bit for the paragraph tag in this, H2, so that the icon was at the correct height. But so it's just like, I don't know, there's so much more of this like, oh, this thing is stupid, what's going on? But at the same time, you can manage a lot of these processes at once and still feel proud of the work that you did, because you know that at the end of the day, like, I had to tell this thing to not do the stupid thing and actually handwrite the code myself so that it was doing the correct thing. So there is still that pride in the work. And it can be faster, but you have to be so much more on top of it than you would normally expect. Because well, I guess maybe not than you would normally expect. You're really becoming a manager. You have to be a manager for these AI systems. So management skills are going to become even more important, which is interesting, I think, more than just the coding skills. But there's still that, like, I don't know, 20% of coding that you have to do yourself because it requires a human brain at this point. I think maybe we'll get beyond that. I don't know. Like, the pace of change is incredibly fast, but yeah, there is still the pride in the work because of the work that you're doing. And then I mean, say we get to a point where it's all just management. I'm primarily just in management at PostHog right now. Um, and and yeah, I don't get the dopamine rush of coding and shipping the features. But I get to be really proud of the things that my team have done. Um, so I don't know. I think it's a different type of satisfaction, I guess.
I'm a big user of Claude and like Opus 4.5. It's kind of amazing of what it can do. So like I generate 90% of my code nowadays with like that. I mean,
Yeah.
of course, I'm there reviewing everything, but I can see that I can do 3 times more in the same amount of time. Have you seen an increase in like in productivity in the teams you're managing because of um, AI helping produce you more code? And if you've seen new bottlenecks.
I think for areas of the code base that are newer and less complex, AI can really speed things up. You know, you can basically create a whole new product in a very short amount of time, as long as you're not working in like hyper complex areas of the code base, bugs that are really hard to track down. So for like product analytics, some of the stuff that we have to track down is so deep in there that prompting AI just isn't going to help. You have to know so much about where this thing might be happening. Maybe some prompting helps, but a lot of that isn't sped up a ton. But in terms of like creating UIs and bringing new features to life, I spent a couple hours this week and made a whole new variable scene to manage all your SQL variables, and that is definitely faster. I read a book called Frictionless. I don't know that I would. The first chapter of the book I felt like was useful in kind of explaining why DevX is actually so much more important in the era of AI, and it's their hypothesis is that because code is made faster. If you used to have a 15-minute slowdown on a PR that took 4 hours, then a DevX slowdown, meaning it takes 15 extra minutes to like deal with test failures or getting your stack up and running or whatever it is. That only represents like 6% of, I forget what the actual number is, 4 or 6%. 6% of the time that actual PR took in order to write. But now if it takes 15 minutes to write a PR with AI, 15 minutes of the engineer's time, and then there's a 15-minute DevX slowdown, that's 100% of the time that PR took is now also taken up by DevX issues. So their hypothesis was that like DevX is going to become more and more and more important as AI becomes more of the thing writing the code. I don't want to say the person writing the code. But so we are prioritizing DevX. I think we have a hire up right now for someone to work on DevX at PostHog to make sure that, and it's not about like creating a great dev environment for agents. I mean, that is part of it, but also for the people who are having to manage the agents and manage getting their PRs through. what does that actually look like, and how do we keep them moving fast and not slow them down? So I wouldn't say our DevX. I think our DevX is actually quite good. Um, if you look at all the companies, where's the median and where's PostHog? I think our DevX is actually quite good. Is it amazing? Is it standout? I wouldn't say we're there yet. So that's definitely an area that we're looking at improving because it just matters so much more. One, as our workforce grows, the more engineers we hire, the more painful and the more time these issues cost us. But because really AI just speeds up the workflow.
And what about the impact of AI on the product development process as a whole? Have you seen any improvements there thanks to AI?
So similarly, we've been working on PostHog AI, which is our own agent for analyzing your data, right? And it's been kind of slowly, but then suddenly you look at it and it's like, oh, this actually works really well. So now we use PostHog AI for a lot of our data analysis. Show me how many people click this button this week, or what's our retention look like over time for this feature. Those are things you could oftentimes do in our UI with the buttons or write your own SQL queries. Now PostHog AI can do a lot of that for you. We are going to be releasing and I'm talking about our products because we use our products so much, but for our product development process, but we're going to be releasing like a deep research mode. And our product managers have already started using that to create their what we call growth reviews, which is like a monthly review, detailed review of all of our metrics for a certain product. And so I know Anna, one of our PMs, has already started using that to draft out her growth reviews and gather a lot of the metrics and do a lot of the analysis that can be done within our data. Um, so those are two ways that like it just makes the research process so much faster. And then in terms of prototyping, we have some engineers who will just head over to Lovable and say, build me a prototype that looks like PostHog or whatever that has these features XYZ. I think a lot of people here don't do that because it's almost just as easy to prompt Claude Code and like have it generate the feature or like what a mock-up, a prototype of the feature could look like, even if it's not actually plumbed in. So we see that a little bit less than I think other companies might see it. But I don't know. It's something that we do definitely have people doing. And then I'm not sure how much the marketing and sales teams are using AI. I know they do demos all the time of tools they've built for ChatGPT or Claude Code or to make their lives easier or whatever. So it's very pervasive. We're a very AI forward company. We're all about it as long as the security protocols are followed. So, don't share anything you shouldn't be sharing and make sure, you're being smart about it. But we think there's a ton of opportunity to use AI to make us better. So it's really all throughout our like product research and development and even sales and marketing processes.
So the all this sounds very fun. So it sounds like a very fun place to work in. And but I think also one important thing is that product engineers at PostHog have a lot of ownership and autonomy, and they take responsibility for the outcome, right? So how how do how do they deal with this weight of being responsible for the outcome?
I think we in our hiring processes, we look for people who are high ownership. I don't think that someone wouldn't be happy at PostHog if they weren't a high ownership person. That's not how we work. In fact, that's one of the things that we ask, a team lead when we bring a new person onto the team during their probation period are they a driver? Do they own their work? And that means they have the thing that they need to do. They're pushing it forward. They're finding the next steps. They're making the decisions about what needs to happen. Ultimately, those types of people are okay with the ownership after the fact, after it's shipped, and saying, "Oh, that didn't go very well," right? Sometimes there's a disconnect there, but a lot of the time people who have ownership before launch also have ownership after launch. So really, we optimize for people who are just kind of naturally that way and it doesn't bother them. Um, we also we don't blame people for things going poorly. If you ship something and it flops, it's not like you get in trouble, but we do expect that you are learning from that and making adjustments. So if something flops, we would expect that you don't do it the same way the next time, or that you say, "Oh, I did these things poorly, and here's what I learned." Right. So that's what's most important. Everybody fails. I have done things poorly in the past. I have failed. So it's not like we're expecting people to be perfect, but we do expect that everybody is failing forward and being really honest with themselves about what could have gone better, what went right, what didn't go right, and what can I learn for next time.
And I can imagine someone from the audience can be thinking, if everyone has this kind of autonomy and is so senior and they have this kind of entrepreneurial spirit, right? Then how do you actually coordinate anything? And how do you make sure that people aren't building duplicate features, or maybe they are not being consistent with the rest of the product? How does that get handled?
Yeah. You mentioned having senior people. And I think that's honestly something to be very aware of is that the way we are set up, we are not set up to help people learn how to be good engineers. That doesn't mean we only hire seniors. We do predominantly hire seniors. Every now and then we will bring someone in who has less experience because we think that their relevant experience is really strong, and that we say high slope, so they're going to learn really quickly, and they will be teaching themselves. They're not waiting around waiting for someone to mentor them necessarily, right? It's a downside. I mean, I would love to be able to mentor more junior engineers, but just at the stage of company that we are and the way that we're set up, um, it's not really something we can offer. I don't want to discourage more younger people from applying, but or fewer years of experience. Doesn't matter how old you are. But the critical thing is like, you can move fast and you can make decisions and you can learn really fast. And oftentimes being senior means that you can just make great decisions faster because you've seen them before. And then in terms of like people being making sure that we're working on the right things, we really leave that with the people who are doing it. We don't optimize for never duplicating work. Um, every now and then we will have multiple people working on the same thing, and at some point we catch it. We say, "Oops, maybe we maybe we should have talked a little bit more." But I think that is better than requiring that everybody have like approval processes that take 15 sign-offs before it can happen, because that's just super slow. And so I guess one way that we do try and manage this a little bit is that we keep all management layers super stretched thin at PostHog, which means that at one point I had like 13 or 14 teams under me. And I would attend their stand up, or not their stand ups, their sprint plannings, and just kind of listen at a high level. What are these people working on? And then I would, the hope is that within those 14 teams, one of them I might hear, or two of them I might hear are working on a similar thing. And I'm like, hey, you two should go talk to each other. Or maybe one of the other execs who's watching over a bunch of other teams says, oh yeah, our team's going to work on this. And I say, oh, I heard about that too. And that just means that there are fewer layers of management in which like the communication needs to happen. So yeah, I think keeping management stretched thin across a lot of the company is really helpful for that. But then also making a choice as to what you're optimizing for. Are you optimizing for never having two teams work on the same thing, or are you optimizing for speed? And we've chosen speed.
So, as an executive, what do you think are going to be the hardest things to protect as Postdoc grows, maybe out of the startup stage, and in terms of working in this fun way?
I think what worries me most is the dilution of talent. Um, when you start with a really small team, and you know everyone and you know all the work that every single person is doing, they it's easy to see who's really pulling their weight and who's not. But when we're so diversified across, not diversified in like people sense, but across the different things that we work on, it's hard to know, like, is this just a really challenging area for someone to work on, or is it that this like function isn't work like this part of the org isn't really working that well right now? Those are things that I'm not really even sure how to answer right now, and we're trying to figure that out. Because there's so much variety in terms of, and so much variability in terms of like product complexity and product maturity and user base. And like I said, everyone knows it's easier to make fast progress on a greenfield project than it is on something mature. But how much is that impacting, and how much should that impact the rate that people move at? Which for us, speed has a definite correlation with talent. It's not one to one. There are other things that go into talent as well, like making great decisions and being a great communicator. But speed is a big part of it. So yeah, I think that's something that worries me, is that because things get a lot muddier as you grow, how do you know that your talent density is staying super strong? I think PostHog in general has a very high talent density. I would choose, many, many, many of my coworkers here to work on a project with me. Whereas before, I didn't even know what talent density looked like before I joined PostHog, I think. And it's just wild how much we have here. But it is something that I start to think about, is like, how do we know, as we get bigger, the waters get less clear, and how do we know that we're keeping up the same talent density, I guess, because I think that's super important.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so before wrapping up, I'd like to ask you how do you predict the role of product engineers is going to evolve like in the next 5 years? Do you think it's gonna stay like a bit niche, or maybe more companies are going to adopt it?
I think it'll be interesting. I think a lot of people are going to start calling them product engineers. One of the actual concerns that I have, which I think I'm not alone in this concern, um, but I think there's going to be a lot of people who can go from 0 to 85% in terms of building something that, like, functionally and from an engineering perspective, it's 85% of the way there. And so I think a lot of those people will end up calling themselves product engineers. They'll have a strong emphasis on the product part of it. Like, say a PM today who isn't an engineer starts vibe coding stuff, right? They might call themselves a product engineer at that point because they're actually building product, but they're probably going to be lacking like that critical last 15% that really makes it a solidly engineered, stable, reliable product. Especially when it comes to like growing that in the future. And I think that problem, I actually worry about that problem in about, maybe not in 5 years, maybe in about 10 to 15 years. I think it's going to be harder for students to learn core engineering concepts. And so how are we, if no one's going through the junior stages of engineering, how do you grow a senior engineer, right? Who knows all the edge cases and how these things interact. And I don't know. I think it'll be really interesting. At the same time, the optimist in me says, like, people said the same thing about calculators. How are people going to understand the math if they just type in the buttons and it gives them the answer, right? And it's like, well, a lot of the time you don't. I mean, you should understand the concepts, which we still teach in school. But I don't need to hand write out a derivative, every time because I can, the calculator can do it for me. So I don't I don't really know. I can't predict how that will look, but it is a slight concern that I have, is that we're going to actually, I think the role of a senior engineer is going to become way more valuable. But it's going to be way harder for people to get there. I don't think our systems are going to be set up for fostering people to grow into senior engineers. So then product engineering, I think, will be the mix of people who are able to build products more easily, but it still have that like core engineering skill set, and they can get that last 85%. And will I think it might actually enable people to be more um more product engineers. Like, I think it might actually enable that more people call themselves product engineers. There are a lot of people who, um, aren't that great with design, don't really feel that comfortable making a front end, but if they can vibe code it together, I don't want to, front end is my favorite part of the tech stack, but at the same time, it's one of the most flexible and like you don't need it to be as robust as your backend. And so, letting Claude or whatever your agent of choice is vibe that out, like that's probably totally fine. So I imagine we'll find more people being able to pick up the front end of the tech stack, when, maybe previously they wouldn't have called themselves a product engineer before because of that. At the same time, I think the best product engineers are people who really care about UX and therefore have kind of found themselves on the front end anyway, because that's where they can really impact UX. So I don't know. I think it'll be really interesting. I think it'll be one thing we've found actually in all of our hiring is it's a little bit harder to find. It's harder to figure out what are people's actual strengths as opposed to things that AI is just good at, right? AI can throw together a decent UI really quick. But does that mean the person's actually a good product person? It's definitely harder to suss out in interviewing.
It's all about critical thinking, right? Like,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So we're good at the end of this episode, and thank you very much for joining the podcast. If anyone has any questions for you, where they can contact you, where they can find you, where are you most active nowadays?
Yeah. Raquel at, and then I won't say the rest of it, but people can email me.
Find it.
And yeah, I think that's the best way for people to get in touch. I also have my own website, but there's like nothing there. So
Okay. Thanks again, Raquel.
cool. Yeah, thank you, Pepe.